right, folks, I'm alive and I'm well. My family's well. A lot of people have been reaching out and asking if we're affected by the fires. No, we are not. We don't live in Kelowna anymore. We sold our place there a few years ago. And now we're up here, which I keep my location private. And but I can tell you that we are in southern BC, but we're not affected by the fires. So yeah, we're all right. Thank you for reaching out and asking and inquiring and praying for us. People have been saying they're praying for us. I appreciate that, but we're fine. So today, I wanted to talk about a subject I've wanted to make a video about for a long time. I've been making notes and building it up. So I got my phone with my notes on it today, and we're going to get into it. And the title of today's video is "We're Under Attack, but We're Fine." But it is finally time to obliterate the climate change narrative, and I'm going to do my best with that here today. And the reason I want to do this is because I'm a seeker of truth, and I care about humanity, and I care about the environment, and I care about the general overall state of the people and the community and the world around me. And I think the climate change narrative is doing a lot of harm, and it is going to potentially do a lot more harm to humanity, because it is not about saving the climate, whatever that means. It's about bringing in a totalitarian government surveillance state, big government state. That's what it's always been about. And you're the carbon. And reducing the carbon means reducing you and reducing the population. So I'm going to get into that today. And yeah, I was kind of inspired to do this video just out of a lot of things that are happening right now. You can see I've got smoke in the air. We've had maybe about a week of smoke right now, and it's been a bit of a drag, though fortunately for us, we're very high elevation. Well, we're 1,000 meters, 3,000 feet in elevation, and so the smoke is a lot less worse up here than it is in the valleys. But yeah, I kind of felt inspired to make this video. One, because I'm kind of pissed off at what's going on in Kelowna, because that was I was born and raised there, and I still have a lot of good friends there and a lot of memories. And what's going on right now isn't right, and it could have been stopped. And when I see the media virtue signaling about climate change and all this, and then blaming it on saying climate change caused this fire, I'm going to dispel that too coming in this video. But it's got me pissed off, because a lot of people have lost their homes and their livelihoods, and expedient politicians are using this as a way to bring in the New World Order, which that's what it's always been about. And so that's what I'm going to get into today. I haven't posted a lot of videos this summer, really. The main reason for that is I've just been so busy with the construction. I am involved in the construction. I'm not framing or anything, but I'm doing all the machine work and all the earth work, and I'm lifting up joists onto the deck with the machine, and I move materials for the guys. I am quite involved in it. But I'm also just doing a lot of landscaping and earthworks and things like that. So I've been really, really busy with that. But if you want to follow me and hear what's on my mind and things like that more often, I'm on Twitter now, and I went back on there. I've been on there for a month so far, but I took years off social media. I've gone back on Twitter, mainly because out of all the other social medias out there, I like Twitter because it was based on text-based stuff. Now people just share memes and stuff a lot more, but it's still a lot based on words, and I like words. I like writing. I'm going to write another book, probably when I'm done this, maybe in a couple of years. I like writing. I like sharing ideas. I like hearing other people's ideas. I like interacting with other thought leaders and just people who have interesting things to say. So I'm on Twitter. You can follow me there at offgridstone. And yeah, I'm posting a lot of stuff. I'm still on Telegram, though I don't use Telegram as much. But I am on there, t.me/SHTF Farmer. You can find me on there. And of course, I'm still posting at fromthefield.tv. Still the majority of my videos go there. Though videos like this where I'm riffing on ideas and things like that, I'm putting up on YouTube and Rumble. And the live streams happen on Rumble. And what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to post this and premiere it. And I'm going to do a live stream right after it. So if you're watching this video, we're going to do this live stream on a Monday. I'll put the information in here, but I'm going to premiere this video at a time. You're going to see it pop up, and then I'm going to do a live stream right after. So if you want to riff with me, come in and talk and chat on the live stream, and we'll do a live stream as I've done them. But I wanted to do this thing first so that I could basically get all these ideas and words out without distractions of looking at the chat or things like that, and then just hang out and riff. And so that's what we're going to do. So again, yeah, those videos are on Rumble. The live streams go on Rumble after they're taken off YouTube. And I've mostly just focused on YouTube and Rumble, though my videos do mirror onto Odyssey still. The live streams don't, though, because Odyssey can't handle the length for some reason. And yeah, that's where you can find our stuff. And of course, all the courses that I make are at fromthefield.tv, and that's what I spent a lot of time on with content this year. So what I want to talk to you guys about today is what I said in the title. I want to really take a shot at the climate change narrative. And what we're going to do in this video is I'm first going to talk about, I'm going to address the elephant in the room right now, which is the Kelowna fires, because I have a number of things to say about that. And then I'm going to get into my backstory about climate change and why it was such an important issue for me, and how my position on it now is completely, it's not totally the opposite, because I've always had passion for the environment, but my position on climate change is very different than what it was a number of years ago. And then I'm going to lay out my case as to why I think the climate change narrative is a lie. And there's nuance to that too, because climate change isn't a lie. It's an issue that I'm going to get into. So first of all, let's get into the elephant in the room, which is what's going on in Kelowna and what do I think about it. So first of all, I got Roxy with me. First of all, Kelowna has always been fire prone. I was born and raised there, and in my life, I have probably witnessed it about a dozen fires that have affected us. It smoked out. You can see them from the valley or whatever, and they've been in the immediate area. I've witnessed about a dozen, and so I'm turning 44 next month. Crazy to think, but I've seen a lot of fires in my life in Kelowna. So wildfires are nothing new whatsoever. Secondly, wildfires are so prone in Kelowna because Kelowna is a semi-arid desert. And it's actually very similar to the climate I'm in, with less trees. And it's what's referred to as a BSK climate. If you look at the Köppen-Geiger climate classification map, which is a great way to view climates and get an understanding of, the nuance and the flora and fauna, the precipitation cycles, what are the summers and winters like, all that kind of stuff. Understanding the climate classification system is very handy if you spend time looking at land and analyzing land, which I do. I spend a lot of time helping people find land. I mentioned the Homestead Accelerator and the Finding the Perfect Homestead Property, which are basically me showing you how to do it, how to evaluate land, and then now we do it for you. But anyways, I spend a lot of time on this and analyzing this stuff. So Kelowna is a BSK climate, semi-arid desert. It's super dry, and it's a really unique microclimate. If you look at it on the climate classification map, what you see is DFB, which is boreal climate, which was what I'm in, cold climate, zones 4 to 6 would be in USDA zones 4 through 6 would be in a DFB, and it's softwood trees. You have cold and precipitous winters in a DFB, but you have hot and dry summers. So a BSK, which is Kelowna's in this little sliver of a BSK surrounded by DFB, you have the same aspects of a DFB, such as the hot and dry summers, but in a BSK, you don't get a lot of snow. Kelowna doesn't get a lot of snow. It's as far as Canada is concerned, it's a fairly mild climate. There's many winters in my life we had 0 snow. And so Kelowna, in the immediate area, doesn't get a lot of water accumulation in the soil and in the treed areas around it. It is fortunate, though, to be on a lake, and that's why Kelowna is a very special growing climate. And part of my success in farming and all that, and getting started in Kelowna, is that I was in a very good climate to grow in to begin with. The fact that it's a BSK surrounded by a DFB is really cool. A DFB is a great climate, but you get longer winters and lots of snow. In Kelowna, I could grow stuff. I was sometimes rototilling outside in January in some years of my farming career. So it's a unique climate that's very good for growing. It's why there's a lot of good farmers there. It's actually relatively easy to be organic in that climate too, because it's dry. So if you've got a large body of water or source of water and a dry climate, it's actually a really good combination. If you're in a really dry climate with not a lot of water, it can be a dangerous situation to be in as far as growing is concerned. So, what else do I want to say on that? So anyways, there's a history of fires going back to the late 1800s when people first started coming out west to that area and discovering that area. It has been known that there's always been fires there. Because of that, Kelowna also has a massive amount of really good infrastructure for fighting fires. Many of the years that I witnessed fires, I saw the water bombers, the big planes. Kelowna has access to some of the best and biggest planes in the world. The Canadians and Russians, actually there's some American-made planes too, but Bombardier, which is a Canadian company, makes some of the biggest infrastructure out there for putting out fires. Some of these planes can carry 75,000 liters of water. It's crazy. Just to give you an example, here's my cisterns. That's 16,000 liters of water in those 4 tanks. There's 4,000 each. Could you imagine a plane carrying a multiple of that, 5x of that? It's crazy. But anyways, that infrastructure's there, and so this brings me to a question that I have about the fires right now in Kelowna. That is sort of the main reason why I'm bringing this video and felt inspired to record this video. Is with all the infrastructure that Kelowna has, and I've witnessed many times that infrastructure knocking out fires very quickly. Why didn't they knock out the West Side fire very quickly? They could have, because now there's so much smoke out there that it's hard to navigate. And I have many years spent in helicopters when I was a tree planter, that I know if it's too socked in, you can't. It's dangerous, and so you can't just fly into the smoke or thick clouds, especially with low-flying planes and helicopters. Big jets up in the atmosphere is a different story, but you can't just fly in there. So I get why they can't do it now. But this fire started, and they could have hammered it right away, but they didn't. Why? I don't know. I'm not going to make a claim, but a similar thing, and I'm hearing reports already, and I don't want to speak too soon, too quickly, because this whole thing is still going. But I'm already hearing reports from people that I know, because I was born and raised in Kelowna, and I know people in all kinds of sectors. I'm hearing that people were told to not respond. People were told to not go at it right away. Just like in Kamloops, just north of Kamloops, in 2019, there was big fires. People remember. And it was a lot of virtue signaling about climate change with the leftist politics. And that fire could have been prevented. There are hundreds of testimonies online, and people you can talk to if you go in that area. Farmers, ranchers, loggers had the infrastructure and the means to knock out a huge fire break when that fire started, and the government came in and told them to stand down, and they blocked access. They were told to stand down, and they prevented it from stopping. Why? So, it's the same thing in Hawaii. the Hawaiian fire right now. You can go down a rabbit hole on that, and I don't really like how sometimes people just throw out too many ideas of potential conspiracies too early, because you got to let the dust settle. But we know from testimony those fires could have been stopped early if they would have turned on the damn water. They stopped them pumping water. Why? Why would they do that? And that's going to go to the crux of what I'm going to try to break down with this whole thing about climate change, is that there's a big agenda to convince you that the sky is falling. And I'll circle back to this again and throughout this, but it really comes down to fear. And I can tell you, I was very scared of it. And I'm gonna get when I was younger, and that's the next part of what I want to talk about, is how I changed my position on all this. But I got to give you a bit of backstory first. So I was all in. You can go, and just to prove myself, and I don't have a problem admitting that I was wrong about something, because I like change. I think change is good. And I'll actually propose that climate changes, and it always has and it always will. And it's nothing to be afraid of. But I changed, and I'm not ashamed of that. But you can go back in my videos. It's probably the first video I ever published on YouTube. A really nice couple made it. And they made a video about me, and it's an interview with me probably 2 or 3 years into my farming career. And I was still really wide-eyed and bushy-tailed. And I had a lot to say, as I always have. But I really, really believed that climate change was impending doom, and that us driving vehicles and burning fossil fuels was an existential threat to humanity. And that's why I started my farm by bike when I did. People who are new to my content look at my videos and see all this nice stuff behind me in this beautiful place that I'm in, and we're building a nice house, and they wonder how I made money. Well, I made money because I worked really hard for a long time. And I'm not going to get into all that, but I started with a bike and a trailer, and I was pulling my BCS rototiller on a bike and a trailer. And that's how I started. And I bought in, all in. I was, for years, I was invited as a public speaker to conferences about sustainable development or climate change. And I contributed to pushing this narrative, and it's part of the reason why I'm coming out today. This isn't new to anybody who's followed me. I've been pretty upfront with this stuff for a long time, but maybe this will be your first time hearing this from me. But a big part of the reason why I'm coming forward and presenting this information to you is that I feel a personal responsibility in that I participated in something that was wrong morally, and something that, if it isn't called out and more people don't start to call this out, humanity's going to find itself in a lot of trouble. And I think we're already there. But I'm an all cards on the table kind of guy. I've always been. And so that's why I'm coming out with this. So I was all in. And I used to go to bed at night from the time I was 12 years old, absolutely horrified of the world ending and us living in this dystopian environmental swamp that was just a complete mess. Polluted skies, can't breathe clean air. That's what I thought was coming. And it's a tough way to grow up. When I look at that now, I go, my God, why did I believe? I tortured myself with this BS. And I look at my children now, because I have 2 kids, and I love them so much. And my wife and I love them so much, and we want the best for our children, and we want our children to grow up in the belief that they're born of the Creator, and anything they want to do in life they can do, and they can achieve if they believe in themselves and do good things and help people and solve problems and contribute. And I don't want them thinking that this existential threat that they have no control over can end their life and their children's lives. And so again, part of why I'm coming forward with this information today. But I was all in, and it really sucked for a long time. I was very depressed and angsty. And if you happen to know, if you knew me back in those days, I knew I've always been a fairly social guy, and I was really self-righteous about stuff with that, and I was wrong. And so, what changed me? Well, about two or three years into my farming career, I really started to do more teaching, public speaking, and traveling, and meeting other people and all that. And I started to spend a lot of time with a guy named Rob Avis, who's been a friend of mine for a long time. We're only 2 days apart in age. We were really good friends for a long time. And he's a great permaculture designer and teacher and consultant. And I remember doing a workshop with him in Calgary, and I spent a few nights at his place, and just hanging out, having heart-to-hearts, really just enjoying the time together. It was before I had children. I think he had his son around this time. But anyways, that's not important. He told me when we were hanging out one night that he thought the climate change narrative was BS. And my head exploded, because I had never heard that before from somebody that I really admired and got a lot of information from and whatever. And so I, instead of reacting and saying, well, F you, Rob, you're an idiot, you don't know anything, which might have been the reaction that a lot of people might have when they hear me say this, I didn't do that. I thought, well, Rob's a pretty smart guy, and a lot of stuff he talks about I know is true and works. So he's saying something that contradicts what I believe. Maybe I should listen to him. And so I did. And he told me about a guy named Tim Ball, Dr. Tim Ball, who was a Canadian scientist who had done some lectures in Calgary that he saw and was blown away by. And I actually, before I filmed this video, I wanted to see if I could still find that video, and sadly I can't. There's a lecture he did, I think it was at a university, it's a classroom setting, and he lays out in about a 2-hour lecture, really drills into it. And I'm going to try to do some of that in this video, but I'm going to try to not keep this too long, but I'm going to try to get into some of that. And so do yourself a favor and search Dr. Tim Ball. And older guy, bald, but he's been really scrubbed from the internet, I have to say, and I'm not surprised, right? That's the world we're living in. Is the truth threatens the establishment too much, and so they have to censor it. So, anyways, Tim Ball blew my mind, and I was in a position for a number of years, probably my second, third year of farming, where I was really experiencing a lot of cognitive dissonance, where I was trying to ignore information that I saw subconsciously. And I was still kind of going along with the narrative and hanging out with a lot of these lefties and Marxists and whatnot, which I was for many years. And but then I started to just, because I'm a conversationalist and I'm the kind of guy that back in the days when people would get together and have parties, and also before I had children, I was always just into it. I just get into debates, and I love debate. I love language. I love writing. I love communicating. And I started just challenging some things to my friends about stuff that we all just assumed was absolute truth. And I'll present these to you as I go through, but I was getting so much pushback, and really aggressive pushback. I had people starting to call me a neo-Nazi, and this was around the time, well, I was getting more vocal about this by the time Trump got elected, but during that time, 2016, people were just coming at me. I had ex-girlfriends try to get my farm boycotted, like crazy stuff, because people were like, you're a neo-Nazi, you're a piece of shit, you're a total scumbag, just the usual dehumanization tactics that leftists do when you say something that they don't agree with. I experienced that, and it was before cancel culture got really mainstream, that it didn't affect me in any way. It didn't hurt my business or anything. It didn't matter. It was inconsequential. But what I witnessed there, which is really troubling for me, is that my friends weren't really committed to the truth. They were committed to ideology. And I would have these debates and present the case, and they just, no, that's bullshit, that's bullshit, that's bullshit. They wouldn't even look at the stuff. It's like when somebody calls you a conspiracy theorist, but they don't know anything about the Bilderberg Group, or they don't know anything about the Trilateral Commission, or they don't know anything about the Council on Foreign Relations or the Club of Rome. They don't know anything. So they're just sitting here calling you a conspiracy theorist, but they haven't done any of the research. Like, they don't know anything. So they're just They're just echoing talking points that have been spoon-fed to them through the mainstream media and the education industrial complex. And it was frustrating to me, and I was going, well, this is crazy. And so I really started to, it started to change me, I guess. And another thing that really woke me up, based on what Rob had shown me and Tim Ball, Dr. Tim Ball, is the ClimateGate emails came out, I don't know when it was, I don't know, somewhere in that time. So WikiLeaks, before Julian Assange was apprehended, published the ClimateGate emails, which are mind-blowing. And most leftist environmentalists I know who I've challenged on this stuff won't even look at them, because they can't look at the truth, because the truth destroys the whole narrative. Well, at least will set you on a path to destroy the whole narrative. So the ClimateGate emails came out. It showed that organizations like the IPCC, big finance, big corporations, and scientists were fudging the numbers to make it look like climate change is the apocalypse that we've been hearing about my entire life. And that really made me go, well, this is kind of crazy. And then you start following the money. And then you start looking at the Club of Rome, and how the Club of Rome with Maurice Strong and good old David Rockefeller started this organization. And their mission was to focus a narrative on something that could unite people to bring in a new world order. And they use that term all the time. I love how YouTube in my last video has the Wikipedia badge there saying that the New World Order is a conspiracy theory, but these people talk about it openly. Read David Rockefeller's biography. He admits that he's part of a global cabal. Like, it's right out in the open. But leftists don't like facts. They just like ideology that reinforces their beliefs. And so, anyways, that was pretty much what got me to just rejecting the whole thing as nonsense. And now let me explain to you why it's nonsense, because it is quite nuanced. But again, look at the scientists, okay? Don't just trust me, and don't just trust the certified experts that are approved by the big government organizations, the so-called 97%, which is a total BS lie. And Tim Ball and a lot of these scientists will show you why that's such BS. But go and listen to these scientists. There's a lot of them out there, and they get smeared and attacked because the establishment media has all the infrastructure to do these kinds of things, and they can cook up stories. And now I'm pretty sure that the journalists don't even exist. They just use AI, just spit out a narrative and pull some data points and flash it in front of your face and go, oh wow, isn't that interesting? But go and check those people out. But okay, so first of all, the term climate change is a loaded term that's totally BS, and it's an example of one of these things that they do to pepper it with truth so that pulls you in. But the idea of climate change is a bit of a straw man, because people who challenge the climate change narrative, and I would differentiate between climate change and the climate change narrative, but people who depart from the climate change narrative get called climate deniers and all this stuff. And they use the straw man of, oh, you're denying climate change. Because the reality is climate has changed throughout history. And with the best records we have to look at history, going back to however they use ice core samples and all that, and I understand some of that stuff could be flawed and whatever, but it's really easy to find out that the climate overall has been very different at many times in history. So it's obvious that the climate changes. The only constant in nature is change. Climates change perpetually. Now, that's important to understand, because at least I'm not proposing that the climate doesn't change. I'm not even proposing that human beings can't change our climate. What I'm fundamentally saying, and I think is the real crux of the issue when it comes to climate change, is that, do you think government can do anything about it? Because if a carbon tax and all this globalist infrastructure that we have to get everybody together and we have to have climate action now, if that is the case, which a lot of our political people on the left are saying, we need climate action, we need carbon tax, we need all this. Well, then how come it hasn't worked so far, right? So what I'm proposing fundamentally is that government can't do anything about it. They can, and I'll get to that, but it's probably not what most people think. Because government has forever tried to... The war on drugs. Okay, how did that go? Did that get rid of drugs? No. Okay, so how's the government's track record on getting rid of drugs? Terrible. The war on guns and trying to end violence. How's the government track record on that? Well, it's terrible. Because if you ban guns, criminals will still use them. It just means that people that are lawful, abiding citizens won't use them. So you're not banning guns. You're just making sure that law-abiding citizens don't have them and criminals will use them. And the government's a criminal too. How's the government's track record on ending poverty, right? Despite all the social programs that we have in big socialist Canada, there's people dying on the streets every day. So how's the government's track record of ending poverty? Ending war and peace on earth. How's the government's track record on that? Even in Canada here, which is a fairly peaceful country, is sending money to an absolute boondoggle in Ukraine. So how's the government's track record on that? How's the government's track record on a fair economy? There's rules for thee and rules for me. Justin Trudeau's got trusts and foundations and money and real estate assets all over the world, as well do all the other elite liberal politicians that have been there forever. Same in the Conservative Party too. So the point is, it doesn't matter what you think about climate change even. The question is, how do you think the government, by taxing you and making things more expensive and inaccessible, is going to change a damn thing about it if you believe what they're telling you about climate change? It can't. And it won't. Because if it did, I'm seeing people on Twitter right now, lefties that I follow, saying, look at these fires in Kelowna. We need climate action now. It's like, dude, we've had carbon tax here for a while. We've had so-called climate action with our leftist communist government and the NDP that have been in many times. And the Liberals, the West Coast in Canada is called the left coast because it's been leftist politics here forever. So, well, then how did the fires start? I mean, is carbon tax going to stop these fires? No. Kelowna has been a dry climate forever. And there's a lot of arsonists out there, folks. Look it up. There's leftist arsonists starting fires everywhere. And so if you're saying that government policy is going to stop so-called climate change, the burden of proof is on you for making that claim, right? The burden of proof is on he who makes the claim. So if you're claiming that carbon tax and global government is going to stop wildfires and any so-called downside to climate events, show me how you can prove it. And then they say, oh, well, we need global action, right? It's always, to the communist, it's always we need more communism. But the problem with government programs, unlike the free market, is that in the free market, if you run a program and it's not working, you change gears and you try something else and you get rid of that because you're spending money. With government, when a program doesn't work, they just say we need more, right? So fundamentally, it completely goes against logic and what you can see with your own eyes. And really, fundamentally, that's what's going on with climate change, is that it's an invisible enemy, just like the pandemic, just like the war on terror, just like the war on drugs. It's an invisible enemy and a war you can never win. It's just like in 1984, the war with Eurasia that never ends, but nobody even knows it's going on. That's all climate change is it's fundamentally a way to trick you into giving up your civil liberties and paying more taxes and reducing mobility. Meanwhile, all the big climate change activists are all flying around in private jets and they got big yachts and they're living the high life, they're eating steaks, but they want you to eat bugs and synthetic meat, and they want you to not travel and not drive, and they want you locked down and living under a surveillance state. Meanwhile, there's rules for thee and rules for me, right? And so that's the classic thing about all this. So fundamentally, it comes down to the fact that despite what the government says, more carbon tax, more this, that, how is it going to change anything? Well, the reason it changes it is because geoengineering is real, folks. Geoengineering is real. If you're in Canada, look up the Weather Modification Act. Okay, just put that into Google and you'll find it. It was signed in something mid-90s. Government fully discloses and admits that they're going to use technology to change the weather. And that came after a document published in the United States that's called Owning the Weather by 2025. So it's all on the record. There's no theories with any of this stuff. It's on the record. The government is actively trying to change the climate, and they do it through geoengineering. Check out a guy named Dane Wigington, geoengineeringwatch.org. He's been documenting this stuff forever. It's all on the record. The documents are all there. You can listen to them bragging about it on the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations. John Brennan talking about all these tools they have. These guys have been on mainstream media television talking about this stuff for years. But then they gaslight you and say, no, it's a conspiracy theory, just like how they gaslit you with COVID and all that shit to say, oh, don't trust your lying eyes, trust us. Wear a mask, get a shot, get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, get a seasonal booster. You know, the gaslighting is insane. Going on more of this stuff. So geoengineering is really the only real form of man-made climate change. Now, I'm not saying that human beings can't change the environment, because you have to differentiate the devil's in the details. Climate change is this broad term that doesn't really mean anything. And what most good-hearted leftists think when you talk about climate change is environmental harm. Human beings can cause environmental harm. You can have chemical spills. You can pollute a river. You can pollute a lake. You can pollute the sky with, look at LA. It's a shithole. There's so much pollution, it's hard to breathe, right? You can pollute. Human beings can pollute. I'm not saying that can't happen. And that can also change your environment locally. Does it change the environment all over the world? Well, I would say the burden of proof is on them for them. And I was a staunch leftist that was believing this stuff for over 20 years. And I can tell you that not a lot of the predictions have come true. So I would put the challenge to you, if you've been around as long as I have, or longer perhaps, or maybe not quite as long, but you're hearing what I'm saying. What predictions have environmentalists made that have come true? And they'll say, oh, well, seasonal hurricanes and this, that, they're worse than ever. And even if what they're saying is true, it's not, and it's not that hard to prove. How do you prove that carbon changed that? It's really difficult to prove, because it's a very complicated and nuanced world. As a guy who lives on the land and grows his own food and has been an active farmer for many years, I understand and have a relationship with nature that most don't. And I can tell you, nature is very nuanced and complicated. And to make a claim that carbon, which is, for the record, 0.04 of the atmosphere, okay? Carbon is 0.04 of the atmosphere. That's a bona fide fact. Most of it's nitrogen, oxygen, argon, a bunch of other elements. Carbon is one of the smallest in there. And to make a claim that by increasing carbon output on the planet, even by 100 or 2,000%, if it's 0.04 of the atmosphere, to make a claim that that's changing the atmosphere, the burden of proof is on you, my friends, and they haven't done a good job doing it. Another one is the greenhouse effect itself. I've been around the world on farms. I have seen a scale, and my proof is in the pudding, folks. I've been making videos about farming for a long time. I've been to all kinds of farming operations around the world, and it's standard practice in large greenhouse operations to pump carbon into the greenhouse. Just pump gasified carbon in the greenhouse. Why? Because plants love carbon. Plants thrive when there's more carbon. But the thing that you'll notice when you go in these greenhouses is that they're not any warmer than they would be without the carbon. So on a localized experiment, because in science, if you want to prove something, you have to create a hypothesis, and then you have to disprove that hypothesis. That's the scientific method. That's different than scientism, which is just trust the experts, right? Oh, I don't have an opinion on carbon because I'm not an expert, and I guess I can't just understand that 0.04 of carbon is in the atmosphere. I guess I need an expert to explain it better to me. No, you can understand it. You're not an idiot. You can see very easily on an observable scale that carbon does not make things warmer. And so if it doesn't happen in a greenhouse in a controlled environment, how does it happen here? Well, there's different circumstances, right? Well, the Earth isn't surrounded by a plastic shield. And so, but whatever. The point is, it doesn't add up. You try to look at all these things they've said, and where is it? Go back to Inconvenient Truth with Al Gore. I still bought into this during then. And that hockey stick graph has been destroyed by Tim Ball, by the way. That hockey stick graph came from another scientist that Al Gore borrowed it from. And that guy tried to sue Tim Ball, and he lost. He lost because the facts weren't in his favor, because the hockey stick graph is BS. Al Gore said in An Inconvenient Truth that by 2013, there will be no Arctic sea ice. Well, how did that pan out? Al Gore also said that polar bears might be extinct. Well, how did that work out? You go down the line of things that environmentalists have said for the last 20, 30, even 50 years, because it used to be global cooling. It was global cooling, then it was global warming, then it was climate change, now it's the climate crisis, right? They need to keep rebranding this thing because people don't buy it. And so nobody buys it anymore. In fact, when you look at, and this is what I love Twitter for, at least right now, it seems to be a bit of a gravy train like YouTube used to be 10 years ago, where you could kind of just go down a rabbit hole of threads of content and just find really great stuff. And Twitter is kind of like that right now. It's why I got excited to get back on. At Off-Grid Stone, again, is where to follow me. But you look at these mainstream media, there's so many fractures in the matrix right now, I just love it. You look at the mainstream media articles about climate change, and you look in the comments, and pretty much no matter the publication or the place that the thing is published, like whether it's Global News in Canada, or it's MSNBC in the United States, or it's the New York Times or whatever, when they publish stuff on Twitter, look at the comments. When it's about climate change, almost unanimously people call them bullshit. They don't buy it. And so part of why I was excited to release this video today and do a live stream after this, that we can just jump into right after this video plays through, is that we're on the precipice of destroying this narrative. And it needs to be destroyed because it's one of the linchpins that the New World Order is using to control you. But right now we're at an interesting time, and I think we're at this. And I'm kind of go. I'm going to veer off my points. I'm going to continue my points about climate change, but I think I've made most of them here. Is that we're at this precipice right now where I believe humanity is coming to a spiritual evolution. And people call that the Great Awakening or whatever. There's a book called The Law of One that I read a number of years ago that talks about, in history, there's cycles of humanity waking up and understanding who their oppressors are. And we wake up, and then we have sort of a peaceful revolution, or try to. Doesn't always go that way. And we have breakaway societies in a way. And I don't want to go down a rabbit hole too much about that, but I think we're at this precipice where people are waking up to the power structure of big finance, big government, big industry, big pharma, and all that, and they're going, everything they say is a lie. So why should I believe anything they ever said? And I don't want to make this video hours. We can get into it in the live stream. But people are waking up to that, and now the New World Order, which isn't new, it's old. The New World Order has been around for well over my lifetime. It's probably more than 100 years. Which is the Anglo-American establishment, written about, just like Carol Quigley talked about in Tragedy and Hope. All this consortium of all these groups, the WEF, the World Economic Forum's part of it, the UN, all the Rockefeller family who started the UN, Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg Group started by the Rockefellers, and all these other people. They need to get you back into fear state, because people are waking up and they're starting to realize, holy shit, we're actually part of the Creator. We don't need any of these cronies. We don't need their big banks. We don't need any of that. We can do it all ourselves. We're the ones we've been waiting for. This message that I've been saying for years is they need to get you back into fear state, because when you're in fear state, your mind operates at a low frequency vibration, and it switches you off to your pineal gland. That's what I believe. Okay, I'm kind of getting a bit esoteric here, but it switches you off. And when you switch off your third eye, that's why they want you drinking fluoride and all this kind of shit, eating GMO foods and having bad habits, being a drug addict, being an alcoholic, whatever it is. They want you in a low state of vibration so that you don't transcend the fear and move to a higher understanding, which is where we are. And the thing that's really exciting about the precipice that we're at right now is that if more of us can understand that and transcend the lie and the fear,
we can move into a higher level of understanding. I think humanity can move into a new golden age. I think we're at that precipice. So I'm not looking at all these things going on, despite the smoke that's in the air right now, and it's not nice. I think that the reason why they're launching fires, so-called pandemics, so-called nuclear war, showing all the political corruption in your face. Why is Joe Biden a walking zombie? It's Weekend at Bernie's. Why is Justin Trudeau a complete moron who can't even read a script, right? All these politicians, look at Emmanuel Macron in France. Look at Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, Dan Andrews in Australia. We have these absolute clowns in politics. So what's happening right now is they're gaslighting you, and they're showing you they have to do this. They have to show you what they're doing to get to the next level. You have to go willingly. And all this stuff is coming out. It's all connected to fear, and that's why all the stuff's on the table. They're kind of throwing all the shit at a wall and seeing what sticks. Climate change fear, pandemic fear, nuclear war fear. All this stuff is BS. It's all an invisible enemy. Going on the nuclear thing for a while. Nuclear war is, the fear of nuclear war is far more valuable than nuclear war itself. Because if you look at nuclear war, there's not a lot of upside for a lot of people. Like it could be pretty potentially brutal. I would challenge you to look more into nuclear weapons and whether they exist at all. But just going on this alone, the fear itself is so mobilizing, and that's fundamentally what climate change is. It's the same as COVID. It's the same as the woke stuff. It's the same as the economic collapse. It's the same as fear of the neo-Nazi around the corner, right? I mean, that's all right. I mean, Canada, even the Canadian government just said the other day, what are we going to do about this far-right insurgents, right? It's always about an invisible enemy. Because who the hell is far-right? What does that even mean, right? It means that you go against the leftist narrative. You're far-right. And I'm far-right, right? We're all far-right. If you don't buy into the COVID narrative, you didn't wear a mask, you didn't take a shot, you're far-right. You're a neo-Nazi piece of shit. And that's what they have to do, is they have to dehumanize you. And the reason and that's why climate denier, right? Anti-Semite, Holocaust denier, all this stuff. It's all the same tactics. It's all the same shit. You have to dehumanize the people who are challenging the narrative because you can't win in the debate. It's why nobody will debate RFK about vaccines, because they can't. They can't win because the record of proof goes against them. It's the same with climate change. Nobody will really debate Tim Ball because the guy destroys you. You have to call names, and this is Saul Alinsky tactics that come right out of the rules for radicals. If you can't win the debate, attack the individual. And that's why they dehumanize us. That's why we're all far right. Because if you're far right, that means you're a Nazi. And if you're a Nazi, that means you're a white supremacist. And if you're a white supremacist, it means you're a terrible human being who wants to hurt other human beings. And so now you can justify horrible action against that person, right? We saw it in COVID. You saw it. If you didn't wear a mask, people said, you're going to kill grandmother. You're a fucking terrible human being if you want to kill grandmother. And so that's how it works. That's what they do. And it's a really easy way to find out if you're on the right side of the narrative, is if the other side is calling you a piece of human garbage because you have a different opinion, you're over the target. That's how you know you're over the target. And so climate change is all the same stuff. Like, look at the Club of Rome, okay? The documents, the books they published, Maurice Strong, David Rockefeller created the Club of Rome, and their whole purpose is to use environmental catastrophe as a way to create a new world order. Go and look at their words, folks. These guys write books. It's all out there for you to see. And the general theme of this spiritual awakening that we're going into is that if you have eyes to see, you can make up your own mind. You don't need to go to university to learn all this stuff. You have to have eyes to see. And it's the narrative that the establishment wants to tell you is, don't believe your lying eyes. Trust me, I'm an expert. You don't know anything about pandemics. You don't know anything about climate change. You don't know anything about nuclear war or geopolitics or the economy. You're not an expert. This guy's an expert. and he has the right opinion. And so you need to not think for yourself and not do your own research. Remember how CNN tried to tell you to not do your own research? It's like the world we're living in is so insane, right? But that's the game. You know, it's all about an invisible enemy, right? It's all about a war you can never win. That's why climate change is the same as the war on terror was in the 1990s. When they said, or not the 90s, after 9/11 in the early 2000s, when they said, we're going to go after bin Laden. There's no nuclear weapon. There was never any weapons there found, right? That's on the record. Everybody knows that. Even leftists know that. But they still bombed the shit out of them. It's don't believe your lying eyes. Trust us, because we have the established opinion. And going to that, that's called technocracy. And you can read people like, I would highly recommend checking out a guy named Patrick Wood. He's been documenting the technocrats for a long time. But what technocracy is, it's actually an ideology that was created, and it's a club. And it's the same people that were called eugenicists at a certain point in time. Bill Gates is one of them. His father was one of them. Rockefellers are one of them. These guys were all eugenicists. Technocracy was to create an elitist information for the elites, so that they created a narrative of the expert, right? This is where Bill Nye comes in. This is where Neil deGrasse Tyson and all these total hucksters come in. Is over the last 100 years, they wanted to create a narrative in the culture that you cannot trust your own opinion or feelings on things. You have to believe an expert. And so what they've done is they've compartmentalized you. It's why leftists, who I used to think were really smart when I was one, they all took the shots. The people that were the most educated in society all took the shots. It's because they have been told that the only way to get a valid opinion or facts on things is to go to said experts. And those experts are approved by our institutions. And so the Rockefellers really, you can go back into the history of the Rockefellers. They really started this because they set up this whole apparatus the whole pharma system is an instrument of the Rockefellers. And they took over. Holistic medicine was around long before pharmaceuticals, but they created this cult of pharma, this snake on there. It's the snake oil, right? The first Rockefeller, who I believe was David Rockefeller's grandfather, was literally a snake oil salesman. That's where the whole pharma thing comes from. Look into it. James Corbett does a great series on Rockefeller medicine. Check it out. He really lays it out. But all this stuff's documented. These guys all write books, and their plans are right out in the open. And so it's not hard now to see through it, because if you just use your own eyes and trust your own perception and not propaganda, you can find this stuff out yourself. It's so easy. But it's important now because the fear is growing. The awakening is growing too. It's sort of a catch-22. And every time the New World Order wants to throttle up the tyranny, like they're going to try to bring back the masks and the shots and all that stuff in the fall, apparently. It's important that you double down on resisting this bullshit. I mean, I'm trying to get as off grid as I can, and I'm doing a pretty good job of it, I must say, but we still need to go into town. I still need to deal with people. I'm not an island. I'm doing my best to get as resilient and anti-fragile as I can for food, water, energy, shelter, education of my children, community, my economy, the way I spend money, crypto, metals, you name it, all that kind of stuff. I'm doing my best to get as decentralized as I can, but I still need to deal with people. And when they roll this COVID scam again, you have to be diligent and steadfast. And I know there's a lot of people watching who probably took one of the shots or two and are also saying they're never going to do it again. So you need to join us now, and we can forgive each other and move forward. But we need to come together on these things and resist everything the New World Order proposes. Who is the New World Order? Pretty much every government in the world right now is captured. And I would even say Donald Trump is captured, and waiting for a political remedy from Donald Trump is going to be like watching the glaciers melt as proposed by Al Gore. It's never going to happen. Trump this is another thing. This is another gaslighting. So I'm going to throw this out to my conservative friends and more of my, traditional on the land people, is that Trump and that whole mainstream conservative establishment is just trying to pull you back into a narrative to get you invested in something that does nothing. And the fact that people like Alex Jones, who I respect, even Mike Adams, who I respect, a lot of people, David Icke's another great guy out there. He calls out the Trump BS, which is refreshing. But a lot of people that I respect are still thinking Trump, it's this election, guys, it's this one. And I've heard that every election cycle my entire life. I'm 44 years old, and every time I've heard, this is the most important election, this is the one. They want to get you back invested into the system, which is disempowering, because if you're waiting for the system to change, you don't change. But the way to change the world is change yourself. To change yourself, change your actions, change your habits, change your social circles, change your economy, change your food. You have to change everything. If you're waiting for Donald Trump to save the day, you're going to be waiting on the hill, starving to death, and getting burned to the ground in a metaphorical sense. Waiting for Trump is a joke. And the fact that people, a lot of the conservatives out there know, I even hear Alex Jones say this, is that, yeah, Trump was wrong on the vaccine, and they're just moving past that. He's never admitted he was wrong. That is your signal, folks. Wake up. I feel like smacking people in the face sometimes, though I wouldn't, but wake up. On the thing that affected our lives the most in the last 3 years, the COVID lockdowns, the scam, the bogus shots, the absolute boondoggle, Trump still says it's great. Warp speed is awesome. That is your sign, folks. You're being gaslit. You're being gaslit. The fact that you're giving that a pass and moving on to the next, I'm going to drain the swamp, and he just makes the swamp bigger. Like, come on. It's absurd, because for me, I do identify more with the general conservative disposition, okay? Culturally and politically, I'm conservative in the sense that I want small government, I want more freedom, I want less government programs. I don't really want government at all, but I understand governance and structure can be a good thing, though I don't think we're going to get out of the system that we have now. But I'm not necessarily anti-government, as in I'm not anti-organization, I'm not anti-coming together and providing services, but I think it can be done in a different way without coercion and force. But I don't want to get on that tangent too much, but this whole thing of hoping there's going to be a political outcome that's going to remedy the situation, in my opinion, is just as delusional as 72 genders. It's just as delusional as the sky is falling. It's madness. It's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. Politics and remedy through politics is insane. It will never change anything from a vote. If voting was so important and it worked to change anything, they wouldn't let you do it, folks. I think that's a George Carlin quote. But wake up, okay? Wake up, please. We're not going to vote away the tyranny. If Trump gets elected, I actually believe that he will. The New World Order is going to march on, and he's going to get away with, just like how in the scamdemic, if it was Hillary Clinton that brought the lockdowns, there's no way it would have flown. There's no way, because everybody knew and knows that Hillary Clinton is a witch and is evil and is a terrible individual and wants war and only wants to serve herself through her own private trusts and her own foundations. She's a warmonger. She has a record of being a warmonger. Her husband is completely corrupt. They are not going to change anything good for you, okay? The reason why I feel like a broken record saying these things is because I have to keep saying them. Because I feel that people need to wake up. Because there's so many brothers and sisters I have that are almost there with me, but they're just going, yeah, this next election, this is going to be the one. This is going to do it. No, wake up. It's you. You need to step up. You need to own it. You need to take responsibility. Pull your kids out of public school. Start working for cash. Start working with your hands. You need to, and not everybody can do that, but I'm just throwing things out there as I think about it. But you need to own it. You need to take responsibility for your food. You need to take responsibility for everything that you do in your life, because we're running out of excuses. You don't have any more excuses because all the information is there. It's so easy to know what's wrong with GMO food. It's so easy to find out what's wrong with the US dollar and the Federal Reserve and the central banking cartels and all this stuff. I could go on forever about this stuff. It's all right there. The solutions are right in front of you. That just means that you have to take responsibility. And that's the thing that most people don't want to do. Most people would just rather mail it in. And going back to where I started with all of this, when I was a leftist, when I bought into the climate change narrative, I started my farm by a bike, okay? A pedal bike. And I was pulling around a BCS rototiller on a bike with a trailer. Even then, when I was a leftist, I was still the kind of guy that didn't mail it in. That's why I took responsibility. I believed at that time that climate change was an existential threat that needed to be stopped, and the only way to stop it was to electrify the economy, have a government that can solve it all, yada, yada, yada. I believe that. And even then, I still put skin in the game, and I stepped up. And so, not to make this entirely about me, but I guess I will because I'm the one presenting it, is that I still stepped up at that time, even though I was wrong about the fundamental. But at least I stepped in and said, I'm going to change me before asking the world to change for me. And that is the thing, and that's how they get you with all this stuff, is the leftist narrative, which is, and not all leftists are bad. I mean, I still like Glenn Greenwald. I still like Chris Hedges, kind of. I still kind of like Cornel West. You know, I still kind of like these. It was nice to see Naomi Wolf, who was a staunch leftist feminist. Maybe she still kind of is, but it was nice to see her call out the shots, you know. Whatever. I don't care about the left or right thing, but the thing that the left does is that it's not about you seeing something in society and then you changing something in yourself. You don't like drag queen pedophile time? Don't take your kid to the library. Pull your kid to public school. You don't like the shots? You don't like working at a place that's going to make you take a shot? Make them fire you. Make them fire you. And this time around, make them fire you. Take it to court. Stand in your own power, and they'll throw the whole thing out. And that's why if more of us stand up to this, it's not gonna fly. But what they do is they say, we'll change the world for you. You need to know my pronouns. You need to respect me because you're white privileged, and I need more airtime because I'm a victim, right? The whole thing with the modern leftist narrative is asking the world to change for them, which is a trick, opposed to saying, I see the world change, I'm going to change, I'm going to take responsibility. That's what they don't want you to do, because once you start doing that, you become more powerful. Because when somebody steps up and owns it and takes responsibility for more than themselves, and extends that responsibility to their community or the world at large, that scares the establishment narrative, because they don't want you doing that. They want you being a pacified, numb idiot who can't make their own decisions and has to mail it in or outsource their own opinions to the said experts. That's how they want you. And that's how, even going back to the climate change, how you know it's BS. Is that it's always about, and you just talk to a leftist at the university and challenge them on these things. Okay, 0.04 of the carbon in the atmosphere. You show me the proof that so-called fossil fuels are changing that, right? They go, I'm not an expert. I don't know. That's what they always say, right? They've outsourced everything. They can't stand in anything. The New World Order does everything the opposite as it should be. You know in your heart that if you want to change something in your life, you have to own it. You have to be the one that steps through the door. We've all been victimized. We've all had hard times. The only way through it is to accept the past, own it, and move on and just crush. It's the only way. You know in your heart that that's the case. But the New World Order wants you to believe the inversion of that, which is, no, the world needs to cater for me, my pronouns, I'm a victim, nah, 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 me. The absolute narcissism that is involved with this movement and these people, these activists. It's the opposite of what makes a good man or a good woman or a good mother or a good father, a good individual. It's the opposite. A good person who is successful and is a net benefit to the world owns it. They're not telling you what to do. They're not telling you how to change. They're owning it and they're being the change, right? It's the old cliche of be the change you want to see in the world. They don't want you to believe that. They want you. And I would even say that a lot of these cuck-servatives is be the Chad you want to see in the world. You know, a lot of these guys, I love Fleckus Talks. I love a lot of these people that are putting content out that's funny, but it's like, dude, get a girlfriend, get married, get a family, stop being a chode and be a Chad and step up and make shit happen. It's funny because we're in this world of content, and AI is about to completely change that. But we're in this world of content. There's so much stuff out there. I can go on Twitter and I can follow all these people, and at the end of the day, it's a lot of people just talking about a lot of shit. This is a lot of people talking, not a lot of action. I like to see people crushing, and that's what I try to do as a content creator. I have to admit I enjoy these videos talking. I'm less interested these days in showing how-to videos, to be perfectly honest with you, because I've kind of done it all. And if I do have new things to show, I show them, and that's where I put them at FromTheField.tv. So that's what I try to do. I try to show people what I'm doing. You know, I don't have all the answers for off-grid. I don't have the perfect system. I don't have the perfect way of doing every little thing, but I'll show you what I do. And if you can benefit from that and it can help you and you can do it better, awesome, let me know. Don't just sit there and troll and be a loser and just comment and not do anything yourself. Get out there and crush. But they don't want you doing that. They want you in an endless downward spiraling rabbit hole. And that's where the truther stuff comes in too. Because a lot of people who call themselves truth seekers are so negative and just think because Klaus Schwab is out there saying we need a great reset and all this stuff, and they're Albert Bourla from Pfizer saying that he's happy that he's committed to at least 50% reduction in population on the record at the World Economic Forum, stuff like that. You get really pissed off about it, and it can be really disempowering, and they want you to. And that's another way they control you. Just like how climate change is a fear narrative, nuclear war is a fear narrative, the culture war is a fear narrative because it gets you pissed off. No matter what side you're on, the culture war, it gets you pissed off. If you're on the left, you're, the far right, neo-Nazis, they're coming to get us. Or if you're on the right, you're going, these trannies, this is insane. Drag queen story time, this is insane. It gets you pissed off. And that's the point. And so they're going to keep disclosing what they're going to do because that's what they've always done. But they're going to amp it up. They're actually going to show you more and more what they're going to do so that it gets you mad. Because then you throw up your arms. I mean, I have to admit, folks, walking around at the smoke, breathing in the smoke, it sucks. It's demoralizing, right? But all this stuff is demoralizing. And that's the point. The point is to demoralize you, because if you're demoralized and you feel hopeless and you're in a low frequency energy state, a negative state, you will not transcend the madness. We need to transcend the fear. That's why I put this video out today. That's why I think climate change, just as many of these other things that I've mentioned, we have to break through the narrative and not believe it and stand in our truth, or stand in the truth, not stand in our truth, stand in the truth and own it and take responsibility. Like I said, if you're angry about what they're teaching in the public school system, if your kids are in there, you have no excuse. And I know there's a lot of divorced parents out there that there's not much they can do, but still, you have to own that. You have to own that, everybody's responsible, right? I don't want to point fingers, but everybody's responsible. This whole thing that's going forward is not going to stop. It's going to continue, and it's going to keep presenting things to you that make it more convenient to be a part of it than to not. And that's how they're going to get us. And it's just like Brave New World. that you are going to be sucked into a life of hedonism. We already are. Look at all the stuff that's out there that people spend their time doing, of instant gratification and sort of moral inculpability, in that you aren't responsible for anything. To live in this world where we can just do whatever the hell we want, the government smooths it all out for us, and everybody's happy. And they're going to keep enticing you in, because they're going to keep making it more inconvenient. And so I say, to get ahead of the curve, own it now, because it's not going to get any easier, folks. None of this is going to get any easier. Whether Trump wins or whether Pierre Poilievre wins in Canada, it's not going to matter. The New World Order is going to keep pushing through the system, and the industries and sectors and economies that they have their tentacles in, they're going to push it forward, and they're not going to stop. Because if people bend and flex to it and give into it, that's the signal to go. You're not going to comply your way out of tyranny. We have to stand up. And the way I've stood up might be different than the way you stand up. But the way I've stood up is to get on the land and take responsibility and own as much as I can the things that I need in my life, so that I can completely control the way our children are brought up. I don't want my kids growing up in a city seeing all this degeneracy that we see at Pride Fests, and a month of Pride now and then another week of Pride. Why are you proud? What are you proud of? Pride is a sin, and the rainbow belongs to the Creator. And so I don't want my kids part of that, so I've owned it. But again, I'm not saying what I'm doing is all going to work for you. You're going to have to find your own way. All I can do is show you what I'm doing, and again, take what you like and leave the rest. So I'm going to leave it there, folks. If you enjoy my ramblings and you want to check in with me, again, follow me on Twitter at OffGridStone. And this video will be on YouTube, and it'll be on Rumble. And I will see you in the live stream that we're going to start right now. Okay, folks. If you're interested in having me find you your dream homestead property, every week I send an email directly to you with 10 A-rated homestead properties, and I do a video review for each one. To learn more, click the link in the screen or down below.